The story opens with a fierce battle inside a dungeon, where a party of adventurers struggles against a red dragon. Leading them is a knight named Laius, who urges his group to defeat the beast. They should be strong enough, but hunger has drained them, making it impossible to fight. Laius recalls how they ran out of food before the battle due to setbacks along the way. Just as he considers retreating, his sister, Fallon, suddenly shoves him aside. Confused, he watches in horror as the dragon swallows her whole. Stunned, Laius fears they're all doomed, but Fallon casts a spell that allows them to escape. He later wakes up in a field, where the mage Marcel greets him, explaining that they survived thanks to the teleportation spell. However, Fallon is missing. Realizing what happened, Laius concludes that she was eaten and left behind, since the spell couldn't transport her from inside the dragon's stomach. Determined to save her, he assumes the dragon must be asleep, but Marcel stops him, reminding him that they have no supply. Everything was lost. The adventurer Chilch informs Laius that the rest of their party has quit, handing him their resignation letters. Understanding that dungeon exploration is costly, Laius considers selling their equipment for funds, but Chilch refuses. The group heads to a nearby town, where Marcel eagerly thinks about all the food they can eat, while Laius remains focused on rescuing Fallon. He prepares to go alone, but Marcel objects, insisting she'll help no matter what. Chilch also joins, noting that a thief's skills could come in handy. Laius is relieved, though he wonders if they truly understand what they're getting into. At the dungeon entrance, Marcel and Chilch are shocked as Laius reveals his plan. They'll survive by eating the dungeon's monsters. He explains that since creatures thrive here, the dungeon must have an ecosystem rich enough to sustain life. As they enter, he recalls the monsters they encountered, claiming they look delicious, but Marcel remains unconvinced. He reminds her that she vowed to do anything. Suddenly, a party of adventurers rushes toward them, fleeing from a monstrous mushroom, which Marcel swiftly defeats. Laius declares mushrooms their first meal, but Marcel recoils, while Chilch questions if they're safe to eat. Laius pulls out a dungeon food guide, which confirms they're beginner-friendly. As he imagines their meal, the others notice how worn his book is. He then hears a scorpion and eagerly gives chase. Meanwhile, we glimpse a bustling market near the dungeon, where adventurers gather to trade goods. Monsters frequently emerge from its depths, though their origins remain unknown, and they seem to guard something. Laius triumphantly returns with a scorpion, claiming it was even easier to kill than a crayfish. Chilch remarks on his excitement, prompting Laius to admit his deep love for monsters and his lifelong desire to eat them. As they cook their ingredients, he discovers that mushrooms are best sliced vertically. Marcel worries about poison, but Laius reassures her, citing his book, which states the scorpion's venom is safe to consume. However, the final dish is terrible. Just then, a dwarf named Sinchi approaches, critiquing their methods. He explains that the scorpion should be cut into pieces with the tail removed. Taking over the cooking, he enhances the dish with dungeon ingredients, adding extra greens to the pot. Before he can finish, a slime suddenly falls on Marcel, covering her face and cutting off her air. She panics, believing she's about to die, but Sinchi swiftly dispatches the slime, explaining that cooking monsters teaches adventurers about their anatomy. Sinchi decides to add the slime to the pot, delighted to share his cooking with a fellow monster enthusiast. Once the meal is ready, everyone praises his skills, and Laius explains their mission: to rescue his sister before the red dragon digests her. Hearing this, Sinchi eagerly joins them, having always dreamed of cooking a dragon. As they move forward, he excitedly contemplates the best way to prepare it. The party reaches the dungeon's second level, a vast forest with towering trees linked by bridges. Laius suggests setting up camp for the night and asks Marcel what she'd like to eat. She hesitates, knowing their meal will involve monsters, so she half-heartedly says she'll eat anything. When Laius pulls out his book, she quickly insists that she doesn't want to eat anything strange, prompting Chilch to tease her. Marcel believes her concerns are valid, but understands their perspective. Sinchi reassures her that there are plenty of seasonal fruits, but when she sees them, she shrieks, realizing they belong to man-eating plants. Laius clarifies that the name is misleading. Not all of them digest their prey. Some just use bodies as fertilizer. Marcel still finds it unsettling, while Chilch reasons that since this is only the second level, corpses would be noticeable if the plants were truly dangerous. To obtain the fruit, they must defeat the plants, so Marcel prepares a spell, but before she can cast it, Sinchi stops her, and a vine suddenly grabs her. Sinchi warns her against using magic, explaining that they should only take what they need. Just then, a body emerges from one of the plants, making Marcel cry out in protest, insisting they do have stomachs. Laius clarifies that digestion depends on the species. The one attacking her is parasitic, planting seeds in the skin instead. Furious, she yells at him, prompting him to intervene. Striking the plant's roots, he pulls her free, curiously wondering what it felt like to be held by it. He notes that this type of plant keeps its prey alive by wrapping them tightly without harming them, thinking it must be rather cozy, but Marcel finds this disturbing. They take shelter inside a massive tree to prepare their meal, with Sinchi making a broth. Laius considers planting the man-eating seeds, but Marcel throws them into the fire, calling it a ridiculous idea. Sinchi adds more fruit to the broth, and when it's finished, Laius and Chilch try it, amazed by the flavor. Encouraged, Marcel reluctantly takes a bite, and to her surprise, she loves it. This piques her curiosity, leading her to wonder why the plants produce such delicious fruit. Laius explains that it's a clever tactic meant to lure prey, and Marcel is impressed by their intelligence. Seeing her interest grow, Laius is pleased. After cleaning up, they discuss what to do with the recovered body, ultimately ultimately deciding to leave it in the open for someone else to bring back to the surface. Though the sight is unsettling, they don't seem bothered. That night, Marcel dreams of happily cooking with her mother, but the dream turns into a nightmare when all the food morphs into monsters. She wakes abruptly, catching the scent of something cooking. Chilch informs her that another party is making breakfast using regular ingredients, making Marcel envious. She longs for pork. Noticing this, Sanchi pities modern adventurers, believing they don't prioritize a balanced diet. However, he concedes that even their meals aren't perfect. He tells Marcel that what she really craves isn't pork itself, but fat. Frustrated, she argues that she simply doesn't want to eat monsters anymore. But Sanchi has already made up his mind. If fat is what she wants, they need to find a monster rich in it, or even better, an egg, which would provide the perfect balance of nutrition. Laius has a realization and asks Sanchi if he's thinking the same thing, about a creature called a basilisk, which has a chicken-like torso and a snake's tail. Chilch tries to lift Marcel's spirits, reminding her that she likes chicken, but she refuses to call that a chicken. Laius starts daydreaming about basilisk meat, eager to compare it to cockatrice, while the others find his enthusiasm bizarre. They continue walking until they discover a basilisk nest and decide to take its eggs before the mother returns. Marcel examines an egg, finding it odd, but before they can react, a basilisk's shriek echoes through the area. They spot another group of adventurers being chased. Hiding, they watch as the adventurers get cornered, until the basilisk suddenly locks onto Marcel, forcing her to flee in panic, while her team critiques her erratic movements. When Marcel trips and is left defenseless, Laius rushes in, but instead of attacking, he makes himself look bigger by flailing his arms and making strange noises. His team cringes in embarrassment. Since the basilisk has no blind spot, Sanchi and Laius attack from both sides, overwhelming it and securing victory. They check on the adventurers and find one poisoned. Sanchi reveals he has the antidote but refuses to give it up. He plans to use it in a recipe. The others are horrified, but he argues that cooking enhances its effects, prompting Marcel to demand he get started immediately. As the man's condition worsens, Sanchi remains focused on preparing the meal, plucking the bird and gathering ingredients. He stuffs the basilisk with vegetables and slowly roasts it. When the dish is finally ready, they feed the poisoned man, who, despite his state, is amazed by the taste. Marcel knows she should cast a healing spell, but is briefly distracted by a chicken leg. After indulging in a few bites, she finally remembers and restores the man's health, allowing everyone to enjoy the rest of the meal together. Afterward, the adventurer admits they always struggle against the same monsters and asks how to improve. The group is unsure how to respond, but Sanchi steps in, explaining 3 essential rules: proper nutrition, consistent exercise, and sufficient sleep. The adventurers are impressed by his wisdom, and they part ways on good terms. As the party ventures deeper into the dungeon, Chilch uses his expertise to navigate hidden paths and avoid traps. Leading the group, he instructs them to follow his guidance, carefully identifying the safest routes. However, Sanchi accidentally activates a trap, earning a scolding from Chilch, who warns him to pay attention. But instead of being cautious, Sanchi deliberately triggers multiple traps, fascinated by their variety. Chilch, frustrated, orders him to stop as he explains how an oil trap functions, but Sanchi can only think about frying food. He eagerly asks about the oil's source, while Chilch insists it wasn't designed for cooking. Sanchi persists, so Chilch begrudgingly agrees, on the condition that Sanchi lets him work undisturbed. After locating the oil, Chilch prepares to disable the trap, while Marcel comments on his stubbornness. Laius, however, sees it differently, believing the responsibility of keeping them alive is weighing on him. Once Chilch confirms the trap's mechanism, Sanchi readies his pan and urges him to activate it. Chilch warns that the oil will be scalding, but Sanchi insists. As the device is triggered, boiling oil pours into Sanchi's cauldron, with some splashing onto him. Chilch panics, but Sanchi is unaffected, realizing that the temperature is perfect for frying. He then identifies the oil as olive oil and excitedly proposes using other traps to assist with cooking. Chilch hesitates, knowing that traps can be unpredictable, but Sanchi chooses to trust him, reminding him that when it comes to traps, he is the expert. Sanchi asks Chilch to assist with other parts of the meal, since he's the expert in cooking. Though Chilch struggles at first, he eventually manages to perfect the dish. The party enjoys their food, and Sanchi thanks Chilch for his help, as well as for teaching him about unconventional kitchen tools. He praises Chilch's knowledge, and in return, Chilch offers to share his expertise on traps in exchange for what he's learned about cooking. As they continue descending the dungeon's stairs, exhaustion starts to set in. They reach a dead end, but Chilch borrows Laius's sword and strikes the wall, uncovering a hidden passage. The group is relieved to have saved time, but when Laius inspects his sword, he realizes its ornamentation is missing. A flashback shows him and his sister at the start of their journey, initially part of a collector's expedition while getting accustomed to the dungeon. The castle was coated in gold, presenting a great opportunity for wealth. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon a set of decayed armor, confronting the grim reality that if they perished here, no one would ever find them. They eventually reached a hall filled with armor, where the party leader saw an opportunity for profit, but before he could act, he was suddenly killed. Panic set in as the armor came to life. Laius attempted to strike one, but his sword snapped in half, forcing him to flee. Desperate, he grabbed another weapon from the hall and managed to defeat one knight, only to be attacked by another. This was his first experience with death, and it left him terrified of armor for a long time. Though he studied documents about them, he has no idea what they taste like. Curious, Laius asks Senshi how he would prepare armor as a dish, but Senshi flatly states that it's inedible. Marcel clarifies that they aren't real creatures, they're just animated by magic. Laius tries to argue that eating them isn't a terrible idea but fails to convince them. Disheartened, he lingers on his disappointment, while the others urge him to focus. They decide to push forward, but an armor blocks their path, forcing them into battle. Senshi destroys one, but more immediately begin to move. As the party fights them off, Laius notices the armor reassembling itself and blocking their escape. Realizing something is unusual, he calls for a retreat to analyze the situation. Marcel recalls that armor lacks emotions, suggesting they target whatever entity is controlling them. Laius questions why they are acting differently, suspecting that they're guarding something. The others believe there must be a monster or mage behind it. If they defeat the source of the magic, the armor should stop moving. Laius suggests Chilch infiltrate the hall while the rest serve as bait, but the party quickly decides that he should go instead, wishing him luck. As Laius prepares for the plan, Chilch reminds him that he's not suited for combat, and hiding won't work against foes without eyes or ears. Regardless, they press forward, drawing the armor's attention. The three keep the animated suits occupied while Laius sneaks toward the chamber. Upon entering, he finds a much more imposing suit of armor, radiating an overwhelming presence. It's stronger than the rest, but his priority is uncovering what it's protecting. He tests its movements by striking its limbs, but the armor retaliates, launching him across the room and shattering his sword again. As it advances, Laius desperately hurls a rock at it, but instead of dodging, it deliberately allows itself to be hit while shifting its shield away. Puzzled, Laius questions why it protected the shield and notices something attached to it. He speculates that something is inside the armor, recalling how it previously grabbed its own head to attack and rotated its helmet to track his movements. He suddenly realizes it's a living creature acting on instinct. Meanwhile, in the other room, the rest of the party struggles against the relentless armor and urges Laius to hurry. He frantically runs through different ways to kill the creature, but knows he first needs to identify what it is. Laius doesn't have much time and knows he can't overpower the creature, so he decides to target its egg. He throws a stone to distract its senses, then yanks off its helmet and hides. However, when he inspects the helmet, it's empty. Panicking, he watches as the creature strikes another corner, realizing it hasn't figured out where he ran. Suspecting the helmet plays a key role, he examines it again and finds a narrow slit. Using his sword, he pries it open, killing the mollusk inside. He now understands that these creatures are mollusks using armor as their shells. Quickly dismantling them, he kills the remaining mollusks with ease. Fascinated by their biology, he marvels at how they function like tendons and muscles, wondering which one laid the egg. His friends, still in danger, scream for him to hurry up. Rushing back, he finds his teammates struggling and hurls a shield to divert the enemy's attention, momentarily confusing them. Marcel questions his actions, and Laius proudly reveals the defeated armor. The group is stunned to learn there was no magic user, just living beings working together for strength. Laius grows giddy, realizing that no one has ever discovered this before. He excitedly imagines how this revelation could shock the world, but his friends aren't as thrilled. He then wonders if the mollusks are edible, but Marcel scolds him for wanting to eat something so bizarre and unknown. Laius counters that all food was once a mystery, and Senshi offers to cook it. Marcel remains skeptical, worried about potential toxins, but Laius insists they should try. Examining the pieces, they notice a resemblance to shellfish and decide to steam them using the helmets. Soon, their grilled living armor dish is ready. Laius takes the first bite and is blown away by its flavor, though the others hesitate, watching for signs of poisoning. Senshi finally tries it and is equally impressed, convincing Marcel to take a chance. She's surprised to find that it tastes like mushrooms. Laius becomes even more eager to experiment with new cooking methods. After finishing their meal, they clean up, still astonished that living armor is edible and lays eggs like shellfish. Laius excitedly rambles about it, but the others dismiss his enthusiasm. As they prepare to move on, Laius picks up the large armor's sword to replace his broken one. Upon closer inspection, he notices tiny eyes emerging from the blade. Alarmed, he quickly covers it, hiding it from Marcel. She offers to check if the sword is cursed, but Laius refuses, insisting it's fine. With that, they continue deeper into the dungeon, unaware they've gained an unexpected new companion. Upon reaching the third level, they enter the Golden Castle, now a crumbling ruin teeming with undead creatures. Relying on his hearing, Laius helps the party avoid enemies, explaining that their footsteps sound different depending on the type of monster. He mentions that this level is also home to golems, leading Marcel to dismiss them as inedible, claiming they're made of 99% dirt. However, Senshi surprises them by expressing interest in their bodies. He leads the group to his base, revealing that he primarily hunts monsters on the second and fourth levels. While most creatures on the third level are undead and unsuitable for eating, he explains that golems are an exception. Their bodies are rich in nutrients. He further reveals that he has been using golems as gardens, explaining their ideal because they protect protect plants, and regulate moisture levels. However, they still require maintenance, which is why he established a base here. Unveiling a hidden passage, he leads them to the golems and charges into battle, effortlessly taking them down with his shovel. The party watches in awe, realizing just how experienced he is in dealing with them. With the golems defeated, Senshi declares that it's time to harvest the vegetables. The group wonders if the vegetables act as parasites to the golems, but Senshi explains that their roots actually strengthen the soil, forming a symbiotic relationship. As they gather the vegetables, Marcel is relieved to finally have normal food, but Senshi tells them to collect the weeds as well, planning to use them alongside his fertilizer to revive the golems. She then deduces that he planted the cores inside the golems, which explains why he defeated them so easily. Shocked, she reminds him that activating magical creatures without permission is illegal, but he brushes it off, continuing to plant seeds into the golems' cores. He explains that once the seeds take root, the golems will come back to life. Laius realizes that Senshi has always been taking care of them, and Senshi admits he does it purely out of passion. With their work complete, he declares it's time to enjoy the fruits of their labor. As they prepare to cook, Marcel offers to assist with her fire magic, but Senshi declines, preferring to do it manually to keep his skills sharp. He mixes in basilisk bacon, and once the dish is ready, the party digs in. Marcel notes how delicious it tastes, while Laius speculates whether something inside the golems is enhancing the flavor. Since golems are 99% soil, he wonders what the remaining 1% is, but Marcel refuses to tell him. After the meal, Senshi steps away to use the toilet, prompting Marcel to comment on how clean they always are. She suspects someone must be maintaining them until she notices the others staring at her. Turning, she sees Senshi carrying buckets and asks what he's doing. He casually explains that he's cleaning the bathrooms, as the waste serves as excellent fertilizer. Horrified, Marcel realizes the vegetables were grown using this method. Laius wonders why Senshi is so determined to live in the dungeon when he could have an easier life on the surface. Senshi explains that he's needed here, not just for cleaning toilets, but also for maintaining the golems. With only 3 remaining, he fears that if they die, stronger monsters from the lower floors will invade, throwing the dungeon into chaos and making it harder for adventurers to explore. He finds joy in eating dungeon creatures because it makes him feel truly immersed in this world. Laius questions whether Senshi should join their party, knowing the dungeon relies on him, but Senshi assures him the golems can survive on their own, and he doesn't want the group to starve. They leave with the harvested vegetables, and Senshi mentions that he has customers on the lower floors, though they're likely too busy to entertain him. Since he didn't want the garden to go to waste, Chilch suggests selling the produce on the 3rd level instead. The party enters an unusual shop filled with adventurers who are unable to return to the surface. The shopkeeper approaches, offering to trade, but when Laius attempts to sell their vegetables, he refuses, stating that he only accepts coins. He orders the guards to remove them, but before they can act, a group of orcs storms in, slaughtering everyone in the room. Laius is stunned, knowing that orcs should only exist on the lower floors. Their leader, Jean, approaches the party, not to attack, but to take the vegetables. He immediately recognizes Senshi and questions his presence. To everyone's surprise, Senshi reveals that the orcs are his customers. Jean explains that the red dragon has appeared, threatening their village, forcing them to retreat to the 3rd level. Laius asks where the dragon is, but Jean refuses to reveal the location, unwilling to put his village at risk. Meanwhile, the orcs loot the shop, and Jean demands that Senshi hand over the vegetables for free to help them survive. Senshi agrees, but only under the condition that the orcs allow his party to stay at their camp. His request leaves everyone confused. The party follows the orcs, questioning Senshi's decision and fearing he's putting them in danger. He reassures them, explaining that the orcs possess the ingredients needed to make bread, but this only frustrates them further, as they believe he's risking their lives over food. Upon reaching the camp, Senshi immediately demands the ingredients from Jean. As he teaches the party how to make bread, Jean speaks to his son, explaining that humans and elves have hunted orcs for generations, forcing them to flee underground. Even now, they are still being pursued. Marcel argues that the orcs have raided villages, which is why they were driven out. Chilch urges her to stop, but Jean silences him and takes the dough, helping with the bread. Jean then reveals that the castle was built by a wizard, and according to legend, whoever defeats him will become the ruler. He assumes Laius is just another adventurer grinding in the dungeon in hopes of claiming that title, making him unworthy of ruling. Marcel challenges Jean to take the throne himself, proving that orcs are more than mindless warriors. The two argue again as Senshi quietly focuses on the bread. When it's finally done, Jean declares it belongs to the orcs, but his son pleads with him to share. Marcel insists that bread should be enjoyed with other food, cleverly suggesting that Jean only meant for them to wait until the meal was complete. Senshi reminds him of their agreement, assuring the boy that his father won't break his word. Reluctantly, Jean orders his people to prepare food. They all dine together, and Marcel acknowledges she was wrong about the orcs, impressed by their ability to cook delicious meals. Laius then tells Jean about his sister being eaten by the red dragon and begs for its location, promising to keep the orc village safe. Seeing his resolve, Jean agrees, revealing where to find the dragon and wishing him luck. With that, the party sets off on their journey, leaving their vegetables behind as a gift to the orcs. The two groups part on good terms. Meanwhile, in a tavern, a group of adventurers enjoys a hearty meal, knowing food in the dungeon is scarce. A man approaches their leader, Kabru, commenting on how rare it is for large teams to stay together, as as most split up over money. He suggests that Kabru might be able to defeat the lunatic magician, but Kabru dismisses the idea as impossible. His companion Rin scolds him, insisting they aren't ordinary adventurers. He believes actions speak louder than words and declares they'll venture deeper into the dungeon. As they prepare for their expedition, Kabru orders a week's worth of food. A party member named Mick notices how heavy their supplies are and wonders how some adventurers manage to survive for a whole month. Kabru jokingly suggests they eat the bodies of fallen adventurers, but Rin clarifies that hunting monsters is easier. Still, Kabru refuses to eat them. They descend into the dungeon, and Rin notes that the floor seems easy to navigate. She suggests pushing forward, but Kabru advises caution, aware that strange occurrences have made the monsters more aggressive. Subscribe and watch more on my channel.